Welcome to Lecto. Today we are going to discuss radius. In this lecture, we will discuss the different components of the radius in detail. So let's start. So first of all, we will revise the different planes of the body. So here, the upside of the body is the superior, opposite to that is the inferior. Medial, which is towards the center of the body, lateral, which is away from the center of the body, and posterior side, which is the back side of the body. It is also called the dorsal side, and opposite to that is the anterior, which is the ventral side. So these are basically the different planes of the body. So in this lecture we will discuss the different components of the radius. So actually here you can see this is the posterior view of the radius and ulna. So green, you can see that the green bone is actually the ulna and black is the radius. So here is the anterior view, and at this side you can see the posterior view of the ulna and the radius. But in this lecture we will discuss, main focus is on the radius. So first of all, we divide the radius into three components. So here you can see that we divide radius into three components. So this is the radius, and here upper portion, this is the upper portion. Middle will be the shaft region. So at the middle side you will see the shaft. This is the shaft region, and here last is the lower portion. This is the lower portion. Same here, here is the upper portion. This is the upper portion. Central area will be the shaft region, which is the middle portion. Middle portion is also called the shaft, and last is the lower portion. So we divide the radius into three components: upper, shaft, and lower. So here you can see that radius is actually present at the lateral side of the body. So keep remember that radius is actually present at the lateral side of the body. This is the important thing, which is actually present at this thumb side. Keep remember that the radius, you will see the radius is always present at the thumb side. So here you can see, like, this is a thumb and the radius is actually present at the thumb side. So this point is very much important. And if we see that, if we see the anatomical positions of the human body, then it will look like this. And in that situation, radius is actually present away from the body, so we call it lateral bone. And it is analogous to the tibia, which is present in the leg. So tibia is actually present at the thumb side of the leg. So this point is very much important. You will see that at the thumb side you will see the radius bone. So keep remember, it will help you where is radius present, and keep remember the just answer is the radius is present at the thumb side. So next, here you can see that this is the medial side of the body. Medial side of the body, and this is the lateral side of the body. So actually thumb is present in that situation, in that area. This is actually the area at which you will see the thumb. So this is the medial side, this is the lateral side. At the lateral side you will see the radius bone. So that's why we call the radius is actually the lateral bone. So here we will discuss the upper portion of the radius. So what components is actually present in the upper area? So first of all, you will see the head region. So here is actually the head. You first of all see the head. Here you will see the head. This head is actually the disc-like, and it is present in the uppermost area of the radius. So head is actually the side for the attachment of the capitulum. So actually if we look at the top view, then it will look like this. So here is the head of the radius, and you will see there is a groove like structure. So head is actually at the top side, you will see a groove, and in this groove you will see that the capitulum will articulate. Capitulum is actually the part of the humerus. If you watched my previous video, then you can easily understand then how capitulum, which is the part of the humerus, attached to the head of the radius. So in that situation, this is the head portion, and you will see that this head will also form a joint with the ulna. So in that situation, this is the ulna bone, this is the ulna, and actually you will see that at this side ulna form a notch. Ulna form a notch, and this notch is actually look like this. There is a notch, and this is actually the part of the ulna. In that situation, the head of the radius will accommodate in this region. This region, and this notch is actually called the radial notch, because in this region you will see the part of the radius will accommodate in the notch of the ulna, because radius bone is actually articulating in this region. So on the basis of the bone which articulate in this region is called the radial notch, and in this notch you will see a ligament. So actually there is a ligament present in this notch. So this ligament is actually called the annular ligament, which is present in this notch. So it form a joint which is called radio-ulnar joint. In that situation, you will see the formations of the joint which is called the radio-ulnar joint. So in that situation, radius and the ulna also form joint together. So next thing which you see that the radial tubercle, this region is actually the radial tuberosity. So next region is basically the radial tuberosity, and this is actually present below the neck region. First one you will see the head, second region you will see the neck region, and last below the neck you will see the radial tuberosity. So at the interior side the radial tuberosity is smooth, but if we see the upper part of the posterior side, then you will see that this radial tuberosity is actually rough in appearance. So this is another important point. And you see that at the neck region you will see the epiphyseal line. So here this reddish line is actually the epiphyseal line. This is the epiphyseal line, and it can prominent at both the anterior and the posterior side. This is actually the epiphyseal line, both sides, and it will be prominent at both the anterior and the posterior side. So this is the upper part of the radius. Next we will discuss the shaft of the radius. So we divide the shaft into 3 borders and the 3 surfaces. So first of all, you see that as usual, as we discussed as you watched previous lecture, then you can easily understand we discuss the humerus according to the magical boxes. So we also discuss the radius according to the magical box. So here is the magical box that will help you in understanding the different borders and the surfaces of the radius. So first of all, you see that this is the anterior view of the radius and this is the posterior view of the radius. In that situation, you will see that this is the, first of all we will discuss the borders. So here you will see this side is actually the medial border, and in that situation you will see the anterior border. At that side you will see that this border which is actually present at the medial side, this border is actually the medial border, which is you can also say that the interosseous border, because interosseous ligament is present between. We will discuss later it. And next, this border is actually present at the lateral side. This is the anterior border. Next, this posterior view, you will see three borders. So here you will see that this border is actually the anterior border, and here is the medial border. So they just opposite to each other. This is medial, this is, and central will be the posterior border. Central will be the posterior border. So here you will see the different borders at the anterior side and at the posterior side. Next, we will see different surfaces. So here you see that the surface which is present between the anterior and the medial border is actually this surface. This surface is actually called the anterior surface. So this surface is actually the anterior surface. And next, if we see the surface which is present between the posterior border and the medial border, this portion is actually the posterior surface. This is actually the posterior surface. And you see that the this surface which is present between the posterior and the anterior border is actually this portion is actually the lateral surface. So you see that the three surfaces, anterior, medial and posterior border, and three surfaces, anterior surface, posterior surface and the lateral surface. So these are basically the different borders. And if we look at the transverse section of the both the radius and the ulna, this is not a butterfly, this is actually the transverse sections of the radius and the ulna. If you see that, as we know that the ulna is present at the medial side of the body and radius is present at the lateral side of the body. So in that situation, at the medial side, borders, if we talk about the borders, then you see at the medial side you will see the medial border. So this is the medial border. So if I write it, medial border MB, medial border, and this is the anterior border, and here is the posterior border. So these are basically the three borders of the radius: medial border, posterior and anterior border. So you see that the anterior, medial and posterior border. In that situation, if we talk about the surfaces, then medial at the between the medial border and the anterior, medial and the anterior, you will see the anterior surface. So in that situation, between them you will see the anterior surface. So here you see posterior border, medial border, posterior border and the medial border, you will see the posterior surface. So this is the posterior surface, and between the anterior and the posterior border you will see the lateral surface. So this surface is actually the lateral surface. So this magical box will help you in understanding the different borders and the surfaces of the radius. So this point is very much important, and keep remember that the interosseous ligament is actually present between the radius and the ulna at what border? Medial border. Medial border at where you will see the interosseous ligament or interosseous membrane. So these are basically different border. Let's discuss these one by one. So first of all, we will discuss the anterior side. So we discuss the anterior border. So in that situation, you will see the anterior border start actually from after the radial tuberosity, and it will end at the styloid process. So in the radius, you will see here is a process, projection of the bone, and this projection is actually called the styloid process. Styloid process. So this is actually the styloid process, in which is actually in Greek word it is also called the pillar. So anterior border starts from the after the radial tuberosity and end at the styloid process. At the upper portion of the shaft, you will see that the anterior border is actually oblique. In that situation, this is called the anterior. This is called the anterior oblique line. So upper portion you will see the anterior border is actually curve line, and this card, and because it is actually the anterior view, so anterior obliques mean curve line. So if it will move downward, this is actually the 2D. In 3D you will see the line, and it will end near the lower border. So in the shaft region, lower shaft region, and this lower shaft region, this actually become vertical. So this line actually become vertical in the lower shaft region. So this point is very much important. And you see at the starting point you will see the anterior oblique line, and at the end point at the lower portion of the shaft you will see the vertical line. So this is actually the anterior border. As we know that the anterior border is present at the both side, anterior view and the posterior side. So if we see the anterior border, here is the anterior border, and in that situation anterior border as a border is smooth at the posterior side, and you will see that there is a area at which the teres muscles will attach. Next we will discuss the medial border. Medial border which is present at the both anterior and the posterior side. So in that situation medial border is the sharpest border. So as you can see that this is the medial border, this is actually a sharp corner. They actually the corners. Medial border is important from the interosseous membrane. So approximately 3/4 area, lower 3/4 area, you will see the presence of the interosseous ligament. So here you see that in the medial border you will see the attachment of the interosseous membrane. So this point is very much important. So at the medial side of the radius you will see the interosseous membrane. On the basis of this we can also say that the medial border is actually called the interosseous border, can also be called the interosseous border. So same here that this is actually the interosseous membrane, so which is present between the radius and the ulna. And next is the posterior border. At the posterior side, at the center of the bone, which is actually anterior and the medial. So between the anterior and the medial border you will see the posterior border. It means it is actually present at the center. So you will see another line, oblique curve, and this curve is actually the posterior oblique line. Just like the anterior oblique line which is present at the upper portion of the shaft, you also see the posterior oblique line which is also present at the upper area of the shaft. So this point is very much important. Next we will discuss the surfaces. So anterior surface, in the anterior surface you will see this is actually the anterior surface, and in the anterior surface the important thing is the foramen. So here is the nutrient foramen. This is the important thing which is present in the anterior. This is the foramen. Foramen is actually a hole through which the blood for nutrient artery enter into the blood and supply the different nutrients to the bones, because bones require different nutrients. So where does nutrients come from? So actually nutrients comes from the arteries, and arteries supply the different nutrients to the bones that will help in the growth of the bones. So these are actually the posterior surface and the lateral surface. So here you can see that at this side you will see the posterior surface, and between these two border, anterior and the posterior border, you will see the lateral side, and as such no components, important components is present at that surfaces. Next, last portion is very much important, which is the lower portion. Lower portion is actually important. So I write it here, lower portion. You will see the 5 surfaces in the lower border. We discuss the 5 surfaces. 5 surfaces of the lower border. So these 5 surfaces are very much important. So first of all, if we discuss the anterior surface. So here is actually the anterior surface. So this is actually the anterior surface of the lower portion. And what important component is present? So anterior surface is actually ridge. So you will see the thick prominent ridge. It is actually a projection, like it will look like this. At the top side you will see a projection of the ridge, prominent ridge. So and in the anterior view you can easily palpate, like this is the anterior view, this is the anterior view, and you can easily palpate the radial artery in that situation. This is actually the anterior view and you can easily palpate the radial artery in that region. This region is very much important according to the presence of the radial artery, which can easily palpate in that region. Next region, next surface we will discuss is the posterior. This posterior surface. So here is actually this posterior side. You will see the posterior surface. In that region you will see the 4 grooves. In that region you will see the 4 groove. These are basically the depressions. So and you see that the first is this is the first groove, and next is the second groove, and here you see this is the second groove, and you will see that at the center you will see an important thing. You will see the dorsal tubercle of Lister. There is a tubercle which is present at the posterior side, and on the both sides of the tubercle you will see two grooves, first and second grooves, and here that you will see this one. This is the third groove, and third groove also can also be called the oblique groove. This is also called the third groove, also called the oblique groove, and here is the last is the fourth groove. So here are basically the 4 groove. These grooves are important in the attachment of the extensor tendons. Tendons are actually these sides. These grooves provide the area for the attachment of the extensor tendons that actually present in our hand. We discuss the medial surface, which is actually present at the medial side. So here you can see that this is the anterior side. So it actually 3D dimensional, you will see that this one. This side is the anterior, opposite to that is the posterior. And in that situation, this side which is present at the center of the body is this side is actually the medial surface, which is actually present at the medial side. So in that situation, the opposite will be the lateral. So first of all, we will discuss the medial. At the medial side, you will see a notch. You will see a notch. So this notch is actually called the ulnar notch. Why do we call it ulnar notch? Because in this notch, ulnar bone will accumulate. So on the basis of the accommodations of the bone, we call this notch, actually it is present on the radius, but we called it ulnar notch because we give the name to the notch according to the accommodation of the bone, because ulna attached to or accommodate in this notch, so that's why we called it ulnar notch. So you will see at the medial side you will see the ulnar notch. Next region is actually the lateral. If you see the lateral surface, then in that situation this is actually medial side, opposite to the medial is the lateral, just like the medial opposite to the lateral. At the lateral side, this is the lateral view. At the lateral side, you will see the important component, which process is present at the lateral side is styloid process. So this is actually the lateral surface. And last is the you will see the inferior. So if we see that this is a marker and this is a, let's suppose this is the ulna, and in that situation you will see that this is the anterior side, this is the posterior side, opposite to that is the posterior. This is the medial side and this is the lateral side. In the, you will see this is the superior and below is the inferior side. So in that situation, if we look at the interior side, then interior side form two region, form a two structure. So keep remember that the inferior side form a two structure. So here if I write it here, so inferior side of the radius form a two structure. You will see that the triangular area and the quadrangular area having three sides, having four sides. So this triangular area provide the space to the attachment of the scaphoid bond. So scaphoid bond, this triangular area provide attachment side for the scaphoid bond, and inferior side of the radius, which is actually the quadrangular in shape, and it actually provide a side for the lunate bond. So these are basically lunate and the scaphoid bone are basically the carpal bone. Carpal are which form the wrist. So in the wrist you will see the carpal bone, and which are 8 in number, and in that situation these are basically the two carpal bone. You will see total 8 carpal bone, and you will see the only the scaphoid and the lunoid carpal bone, which are actually just starting to, or just start, or you can say just after the radius and the ulna, you will see the scaphoid and the lunate bone, which are actually the carpal bone. So these are basically the different borders and the different parts of this the radius. If you have any question, then you may ask in the comment section. Thank you.